Hey gang, this is Gareth Palmer from Kuhn Hair Cosmetics. I'm the Senior Creative Design Ambassador for the cutting department. And welcome to Mullet Madness. We have got a fun-filled 45 minutes to go ahead and to share with you. And we're going to get in and just explore the mullet madness here. Mullets are something that you either love or it goes ahead and starts to really create, it creates a certain emotion as far as when you hear that. You're like, oh, you know what, I'm not quite sure about this, or hasn't this been done? We all tend to think about the mullet as far as it being, whether it's Billy Ray Cyrus, that classic mullet, or my personal favorite, the Mel Gibson from Lethal Weapon. I'm trying that one out myself now. So we've got a few different takes on that. So when we start to think about mullets, or when you hear about mullets, what we'd really like for you to start thinking about being outside of the box a little bit more. Love to go ahead and show you a couple of benchmarks that I've got prepared for you. So the first one that we've got here, this is a little bit more of an asymmetric type of a look. So we've got the tail that comes down in through the back. So it's not like your typical full-on mullet that you would normally see out in the streets there. Something a little bit edgier. So when I'm saying get outside of the box and start to think a little bit more creatively. Start thinking about different shapes that you can put together, as opposed to it being so wicked short in the front and then really long in the back. So we've also got another one here as well. So you can see, started to slightly fade her out in through the sides here, leaving it a little bit longer in through the top. And then when we get down to the side, into the back through here, you see she gets a lot of length, a little bit more activation to it. So once again, not your standard usual mullet that you're starting to that we normally think of. So we've got our two different mullets here, a little bit edgy and a little bit. What we're going to explore today might be a little bit more of a classic type of a shape. Starting to see a little bit of length just in through the top there, really shadowed out, so it's got an edginess to it. But then when you start to look at the underside to her fringe, she's got a really heavy fringe that sits down well above her eyebrows, and starts to give her just a little bit more emphasis, a little bit more interest to it as well. Then we get into the back through here. You can see a lot of activation, which moves in there, giving you a little bit more lift. So it's not sitting super flat like Joe Dirt, for instance. Starts to get really a lot more interest, a lot more activation in through there, just to create something just a little bit different. So what we're going to do today is we're going to run through this particular haircut, and then show you some styling tips on that one as well. And then we're also going to finish that out with a little bit of detailing as well, as far as how you can get that super piecey type of a feel to it, while still maintaining a lot of strength through the haircut. So we're going to get started with that now. Grab my doll. Okay. All right. So when we start to, we want to go ahead and start prepping this. Just going to use just a little bit of two-phase spray from Shears. It's going to help just give us a little bit of slip and a little bit of moisture retention through there as well. So we're going to comb that all the way through. Getting a nice even distribution. And then we're going to use some of our blowout gelée from Style, and this is going to be our cutting lotion. So using just a couple of pumps of that, you're going to work that all the way through from the outgrowth to the ends. All right. Working that through, and once again we're going to just start to comb that all the way through. So I'm combing that all the way through. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to section this out. By sectioning this out, we're going to work from our point of a change of direction from behind the ear all the way through on the top to the corresponding side, separating that back to that front. While we're doing this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this video down just for a second, because the person who's supposed to be feeding me, or is going to be feeding me questions so I can answer those for you, is not currently connected due to a couple of other technical issues that we had this morning. So getting fired up. So if you just give us just one moment, that would be perfect. See a whole bunch of people on here. Hey guys, appreciate you all going ahead and taking the time. Yeah, he's got it. So I'm starting to see, I'm looking at a couple of the questions coming through here. Yeah, as far as prepping the dole and so forth, what we want to make sure that we're doing by utilising a little bit of product in there prior to starting with our cut, what it's going to do, you actually start to see that shape begin to build as you are starting to create your silhouette and your design shape. You're also working from wet to dry. So when you start working from wet to dry, what that means for me is it means that as the shape begins to build, I've got a lot less time, a lot less work to do when I'm starting to blow dry that out. So you can really start to see your shape begin to build. So what we want to go ahead and do is make sure that we've got that through. I like to use something that's not going to be too sticky. So when I'm saying too sticky, it's a product that I'm not necessarily going to use our gel, but using the blowout gelée gives that nice slip to it. So combing that through, just waiting for my cohort to get back. I just saw, where's the race car hiding? Outside, it's just hanging out. Heather? You got it? Okay, let's put it on speaker. All right, cool. There you go, got that. Okay, there we go. All right, so combing that, getting that sectioning taken care of. Sectioning the back from the front. Back from the front. Now to start this particular design, what we're going to do is we're going to work on our perimeter on that front section first. So, and by we're establishing a section that's an inch wide or an inch deep off of that front hairline. This is going to be our fringe piece that is going to work all the way across that front hairline. Yep.
What's the theory behind a mullet?
What's the theory behind a mullet? Or like the history behind a mullet? The theory behind a mullet. I know. I think that would depend upon who you're asking. I mean, I think when I end up with a mullet, it's usually because I've been cutting my own hair on the front, and then I don't get to the back. A thing. But as far as like the theory behind it, no clue. I mean, it's just a phenomenon that's just happened. Okay, combing to establish our fringe here. What you really want to be really mindful of is when you're combing it, roll the spine of the comb down onto onto the hair, so you're not creating any sort of lift or graduation there. Then we're just going to place the comb underneath just to create just a little bit of hold, and then we're going to point cut. Point cut that across. Now this is not meant to be super straight, So if you're looking for that perfectly edged line through here, this is not the way for you to go ahead and if you go ahead and do that. If you want that more of that China doll type of a fringe to it, you can come on through the side here and create a really solid blunt line. I'd like to have a little bit of movement, a little bit of texture to it, almost as though it looks as though it's a little bit on the uneven side. So once again, placing that in, making that cut, and like I said, if it's not perfect, then as you begin to...
Gareth, sorry, we'd like to know what shears you prefer.
What shears I prefer? Shears are they're an interesting, that's an interesting thing. I usually work with three different brands. I've got Karshos, or I have Musatanis, or I have Hikari. As far as what's the best, I think what the best shear is what works for you. So when you pick a shear, you're gonna make sure that you've got really good balance in your hand, that it becomes an extension of your hand, as opposed to it not feeling right. So so when you're picking shears, I would absolutely go through and really hold and try a lot of different ones, because you don't want them to be too heavy, or you want to make sure that they literally become an extension. Pretending to cut with your fingers, you want to have the same sensation when you're cutting with your shears. Okay. Working down to the side. Now I'm going to lift that hair up once again, and I'm going to move that slightly diagonally forward. So now I start to get a little bit of arcing around the face there. When I get down to the sides, right down to the sideburns, you can see moving that forward at a forward 45, diagonal 45. And what that'll create is that soft shape as it works down into the side there.
Gareth, why do you choose shears over a razor if you want it to look PC?
That's just my tool of choice. Would you like to see a razor used in this? It gives a slightly different effect. When you're utilizing your razor around the front, you want to make sure, because we need tension when we're using our razor, so when we're utilizing this on the front, so if you've got someone who's got an extremely expressive hairline, which would be a hairline which is going in every direction, in which unless it's the one that you want it to go in, when you start to put tension on it, that hair is going to spring back as well. So with me not having to utilize any tension, I'm just using natural fall on the front here with my shears, I'm actually going to get a little bit better of a idea of how that's going to lay. So if you do have someone who's got a crazy hairline, I probably wouldn't use a razor on there. But because Stephanie here, my doll, she doesn't care, I'm going to go ahead and do this. Just lightly pinching that hair over the top, and then we're going to start to lightly just round that down. The difference that you can see, where I just used my razor there's a slight more rounding to it, so you get a little bit more of a bevel. So if you've got someone who's got more hair than an English sheepdog, I mean they've got more hair than a Yeti, yeah, you could probably go ahead and use this, because that's going to stop it getting too blunt. Someone who might have skinnier hair, I'd probably go back and I'd probably use my shears there, just to maintain as much density as we possibly can. Down to my side here, and then so it just gives just a slightly different effect when you start to do that. So now what we've done, we've created our fringe, and this is going to be where a lot of that strength is going to live. So when we go back to our benchmark, you can see that's that fringe that we've just put in there. At this point here, we're going to take that top down, still leaving the back secured away. And now we're going to start to create that texture that's living on the top side through there. So taking a center section from the top of the head to the fringe, what I'd like to do is I'm going to elevate that hair up You can see that's my fringe section right here. I'm going to drop that out. But because I do want to have a little bit of that hair creating a bit of disconnection as it sits down over the front, I notice where that comes out, fringe drops out, and then very, very lightly just start to remove some of that length. Once again, I like to have this a little bit on the piecier side. Comb that down, that hair's going to sit just a little bit over. As I work my way around the head, I'm going to come off of that top section in a pivot, so it's going to be a pie-shaped section. So you're not going to have that much hair on the top section, but you're going to have more towards the front. Elevation, once again, is at 90 degrees horizontal, 90 degrees vertical, sorry. Take that hair off. Now, when we get to the sides here, what I'd like to do is start to create a little bit of a narrowing of the shape. So what I'll do here is I'm going to change my elevation. So in changing my elevation, if I'm just going to stay here at 90 here, I'm still going to get a little bit of excess length that's going to sit over through the sides here. I don't necessarily want that, so I'm going to go to a 90 horizontal. Here's my guide from the top. Make that cut, take that off, and what that's going to do is that hair, rather than increasing in length down through the side, is now going to start to create a little bit of a weight build up in through the sides through here, so the hair will pop up and then start to taper just a little bit more into the sides where we have cut. I'm going to cut the opposite side here.
Gareth, I have a question for you.
Yep.
Was it over-directed to the first section?
No, that's a great question. Question was the section was all my sections over directed back to my first one? Everything is on base, so so your guide is going to be off of the first cut on the very top of the head, and then what you're going to do is you got one section here, then you have another section here, then you have another section here, and everything does stay on base. We don't want to over direct anything here because we don't want to have any build up of length. So that was a great question. Thank you. All right, so question was, could we use the razor to do this top section? Is that correct? All right. So on the side here, where I'm at with the razor down in through the side here, I'm going to start to change my elevation once again. So remember, this is going to be at 90 horizontal. I'm working my way over the top. I just start to. That's going to give you both of those. That's going to give you both of those sides there. All right, you turn this a little bit. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so depending upon the length of your stroke, what you're going to end up with is it's going to give you texture all the way through or all the way out on the stroke of the razor. When you're deep point cutting, when you start to point cut, you're only going to have that texture on just where that shear enters through. So if you want to create more texture, you can go through and really, really get after it with your razor. I prefer to go ahead and do a little bit of that work afterwards, after I've got my, because I find it's a lot easier for me to go ahead and take hair out rather than put it back in again. So that's the front of that mullet. What you can see is you start to get a little bit of disconnected type of a feel, and that softens a little bit of that, the strength that we had in our fringe area that we cut first. So what we're going to do now is we're going to join the top to the back to create our. Having started with our perimeter right in the front through here, we've got to work out where we want to have our baseline finish. So if you want to have a really long mullet, that's pretty cool. If you want to have one that V's out just a little bit in through the back, once again, really cool as well. So what we're going to do is I'm going to keep her a little bit squarer because I'd like to create a little bit more interest in through here. I don't want to take off crazy amounts of so what I'm going to do is continue with my shape from the top down through the center. And I'm going to be at 90 degrees off the head shape. Right now you can see I'm leaving this fairly solid as far as the shape goes, as far as the texture goes. So what you'll find is as this shape, as you start to cut that, as that shape begins to work its way down, now you can work out whether you want to keep your elevation at 90 degrees vertical, which will make this a little bit bushier in the back, or if you'd like it to be a little bit more of a silhouette in through the bottom, which would be like become a little bit more tapered, which I'm going to do. So once I'm now at, I've cut down to just above the occipital here. Now I'm going to change my elevation a little bit, and I'm going to drop that just a little bit. Point cut down. Pick up the hair down into the nape. And just continue to work my way down until I don't have any more hair to cut. So if you get in close on that center section through there, you can see what we've now done is we have created, based off of our length through the top here, we've created what our baseline perimeter length is going to be. We're going to do exactly the same thing that we did on the top, in through the back, and we're going to pivot off of that top section, and we're going to work our way around. And the reason I like to go ahead and work all the way down from one section as opposed to working that top section, then working around, I find personally for myself that I stay truer to my elevation if I work all the way through one section, one complete section from top to bottom, as opposed to skipping from side to side. Okay, inside. Once again, not going to have a ton. As I get below the occipital here, I'm going to begin to drop my elevation. And at this point here, if you want to pick up a little bit from your previous section on the side there, just as a to give you a little bit of that visual guide, that's perfectly okay. It doesn't have to match perfectly though, because we are looking for a fairly textured type of a finish to it. So if you've got some pieces which may be just a fraction longer, the other pieces which are a fraction shorter, that's going to help with that haphazard type of a feel to it.
Extra a little closer. Straighten up a little bit.
There you go. Is that better?
Now, in the section you're working on right now, is it over-directed?
No, at no point is there any over direction with this. What I want to do is, if you look at the way that you work with a lot of different like mullet type shapes, if you start over directing the hair back here, then you're going to have that forward push. Now, if you want that on purpose, go for it. That's perfect. Me, I want to stay on base because I want to have the shape somewhat mimic a little bit of her natural hairline as well. So.
Another question is, why not direct the bottom? Have leading length is the question, or does that keep much density?
Question was, why not over direct hair? You know, on the sides. I'm assuming on the sides through here. Once again, depending if you've got someone who's got a ton of hair, you can start to stay on base because you've got that much hair to play with. Have that much hair, yeah, you can have it where their density may not be quite as much as on the top there. So if someone's got hair that gets a little bit loses strength as we get towards that outer hairline, sure, you can over direct that just a little bit. That's fine. But on a doll like this or on a client like this, I probably wouldn't be unless I was looking to maybe create a little bit of a forward push, sitting down behind the ears. Okay. And our last section on this side. So you can see when we go to profile here, we've got our shortness on the top, and then as we start to work our way down into the back, it's got a little bit more of a gradual type of a transition. So when we go to our benchmark, you can see that's the same type of finish. Now when you go opposite side, we've got all of this length here. If I was to over direct some of this hair back, it become almost a step, and it would look, well, it would start looking a little bit more Joe Dirtish. Absolutely, because then you start keeping some of that length in through here. I wanted to have a little bit more of that even texture throughout the entire design. So I'm going to work just through this opposite side here. Making sure that I'm staying on base, keeping my elevation the same. Oops. Okay. Working down to the bottom here, into that nape area. Hair up. You see, I'm picking all the hair up. All I'm doing is I'm cutting this top section up. Section down below here, I'll drop that hair back out, and then I'll pick that up to keep that at its correct elevation. So you can see 1, 2, 3. Drop that length out. Pick that back up again. 1, 2, 4. A little bit of a beveling with that shape. Last section on the side. Drop that down. .45. Now, because I'm picking up some of my guide from the other side, rounds out behind the ear, so I'm really not affecting any of this hair down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut from a guide here basically to a guide here as I bring that over. So there's your shape. As you start to play with it, like I was talking about at the start of the video, working from where she's already got product in there, you can start to see maybe you got a build up of weight somewhere, or maybe you need to maybe one section, or you want to take it a little bit shorter in through the top through here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, so I'm going to show you a couple of quick blow dry tips just on this section here. And I'm not going to blow dry the whole doll because that's no fun to watch. But what we will do is, once I've shown you a couple of tips and how I blew this doll out, we'll then go to our benchmark and we'll start to detail that out a little bit. That way you're able to really sort of get the complete picture without having to sit through an entire blow dry. So what I'll do right now, so just to recap, I've got two-phase spray in here. That's giving me a little bit of that slip. I used some of our blowout gelée from Style. And just on the front section through here, what I'm going to use is I'm going to use some of our root volumizer. And I'm going to apply that relatively liberally. And then when we blow dry this section, because I don't want that pop up off of the head here, so I really want to control that just a little bit more. So I'm going to use my comb as my blow dry tool, along with my blow dryer. And very lightly, just using that fine tooth end of the comb, and all we're doing is we're just laying that all the way down. If you find that the fringe starts to pop up, start laying. Sorry? I'm sorry?
Can you get in a little closer?
As you start to blow dry this, if you find that the fringe begins to pop up a little bit, roll your comb down. So instead of just blow drying it like so, roll your comb down so the spine of the comb is dragging behind, and what you'll find is that'll get it a little bit more compressed against the head. So that by blow drying that way, and this is a great tip for your clients as well, when you're blow drying it that way and you want to produce a lot of texture in through the top, you don't necessarily have to produce so much texture, because this is laying down. So now they're starting to sort of play against each other, and one finish is going to help the other one. So just rolling all the way through, pushing that all the way down.
Is that a Gamma blow dryer?
The question was, is this a Gamma blow dryer? Yes, this is a Gamma professional blow dryer. I've had it for a couple of months now, and it's a good blow dryer. I'll be honest with you, if nothing else, the lightness of this blow dryer, I wish I had it 30 years ago, because my hands and my arms wouldn't hurt as much as what they do now. So yeah, it's good. Took a little getting used to. I've enjoyed it. It's been good. Absolutely. The top section, you're starting to see a little bit more shape start to get in there. What I'm going to utilize, I'm going to go back to my root volumizer, and I'm going to spray that all the way through, and then begin to crunch that into the hair. And by crunching this into the hair, rather than combing it all the way through, now we're going to start to create a little bit more texture as well. And this is exactly what I did with the other doll. So putting that in, and you'll be able to feel it when you've got enough product in there. Start to work that all the way through. Now with my dryer, I'm going to turn it down to its lowest power setting, and I'm going to use this on my highest heat setting, and lightly just start to crunch a little bit of that, a little bit of texture into the hair. And what you'll find is, rather than trying to create that haphazard type of a lived-in look with a round brush or a bent brush or something along those lines, what you can do is you can start to create a little bit more of that textured feel just by really accentuating the use of the product and the way that you're blowing that in. Use the dryer so if you want to blow a little bit of that hair over the front, blow some of that hair going towards that front section. When you get to the back, when you get to like the crown, working my way up in there, and what that's going to start to create is a lot more lift, and you're going to eliminate that super flat spot that sometimes you'll see out on the out in the field, you can tell at the mall, if we're still allowed to go to the mall. But by creating some of that lift through there, so it's just going to round out that shape for you a little bit more as well. When you get into your sides, here, let's not blow up into it this way. Let's work our way over the top, because what I'd like to create is almost a little bit of a heart type of a shape with it. So I don't want to create a ton of lift through the sides. So I'm going to work that all the way over, and all the texture is just coming from it's almost like a rouging type of a feel. So if you're rouging out curly hair, and then in through the back, you're going to do exactly the same deal. So that's how we got to our finished product, our blow dry product. So I'm just going to switch this out, and we go to our finished doll. So you can see a lot of lift, a lot of texture, a lot of motion that's in there. And I'm going to take her off there and you can get her up real close. And you can see it's not a super finished or super polished type of a look. James Helton and I did sorry, not James Helton. George Alderetti and I did a class a couple of weeks ago at the Academy, and one of my cuts somehow ended up looking like Bon Jovi. And now I sit back and look at this, it kind of looks like Bon Jovi again. So maybe I'm just stuck in the 80s. I'm not quite sure how that works, but it's a cool shape. Now the way that we're going to texturize and detail this out just a little bit to give it a little bit more of that airiness to it. Now I did color this doll as well, and I used some of our cream blonde and 20 volume. Just put the color onto, put the lighter onto my hand. And just, once again, I rouged that in just to create a little bit of lightness at the end. So I almost gave it a little bit of a darker outgrowth. So it's able to, just to create a little bit more of that area type of a feel to it. To texturize this, I basically stood back and looked at her and just said, okay, where can I do with a little bit more texture to it, to round out my silhouette? Where's there weight or visual weight that was sitting there? So just by picking up bits and pieces over the top, we're not going to rake our shears all the way through it like so. We're going to pick up some of that hair, and then very, very lightly, we're going to cut on the way out. And what this is going to create, so you can see we're cutting a little bit of hair off. But what that's going to do, that's going to give a little bit more texture. It's also going to give shorter pieces on the top through here to help give that hair and that length a little bit more lift. My personal favorite when it comes to cuts like this, I really like to get that crown really short, so it doesn't, because that's going to be the first part that's really going to want to sit down and sit flat. So I'm going to get into her crown here and really start to get after it. Now this cutting motion it's a light chatter. When I say a light chatter, I mean it's a chatter, 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 chatter. You're not talking loud or you cut all the hair off. So what we want to do is on the upward motion, you're lightly closing your shear. So it's not a back cutting, you're cutting on the way out. What this is going to do, you can almost start to see that hair wanting to sit up just a little bit more. What it's also going to help with the silhouette on the top here is that the more that this is going to start to sit out, the more rounded that's going to look. So you can see I didn't stay super full at the bottom. I tapered that down into her nape, and then on the bottom you can see it's not square across that bottom section. It's really become quite piecey and quite endy, and it's once again it's I don't want to say it's not polished, but it's got a little bit more of that lived-in type of a feel to it. If you do have one of those clients who has got just insane amounts of hair and you want to break up that front fringe just a little bit, we're going to go back to our razor. And I'm just going to use a little bit of Brilliant Gloss Spray. Surprise, surprise, for those of you who I've met. Just on that fringe. And then using our razor like a pencil, what we're going to do is we're going to just start to give it just a little bit of a push. Now you can see how far across I'm going. So the motion, the cutting motion, is a diagonal motion. If you start staying really, really up and down with the hair, you're not going to take any of that hair out. So I don't create just a push all the way across, I want to make sure that I'm changing the way that I'm putting that in so it becomes a crisscross. That way it starts to sit really, really where it wants to, as opposed to having a push all the way across to one side. So we can do that. So that's across the front. When I get to my sides, where it's really short, I want to encourage that hair to go forward. So when we cut this, remember we elevated that up. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to, in a diagonal up motion, and that is going to help keep that hair sitting up and rounding out into that face. Do it once more on the opposite side.
Gareth, I have a question for you when you're ready.
Yep.
Do you texturize like that on the whole head?
With a pencil, like using the question was, do I texturize like that on the whole head? You can, if you would like to utilize your razor that way. I don't. I prefer to use my shears that way. And when I say shears, I'm not using my texturizing shears or my blending shears. I like to use my straight edge blades, because I can actually place it in and I say, all right, that piece right there is too thick. I can then remove that out, and depending upon how much pressure I'm using on my blade here as to how much hair I'm going to remove out. Could you do that with your razor? Sure, you could pick that up, but I feel as though I've got a little bit more control with my shears than what I do with my razor. So that's a great question. Thank you for that one. So you can really start to see our shape start to come in. At this point here, I tell everybody who is cutting hair, and anyone who has been to one of our programs, stand back. Stand back. Don't stay here the whole time. You're so in your haircut that sometimes you can't see what you really need to see. Stand back by about 6 feet and really take in the entire shape. Really make sure that you're looking for that visual balance. Now, is this a technically perfect haircut? Technically, it's perfect. It's not a beauty school perfect haircut, but we shouldn't be doing beauty school perfect haircuts anyway. So what this is a highly personalized haircut that is technically correct, but is visually balanced and visually pleasing for your client. So so you're not just doing exactly the same haircut on on the same person, or on multiple people over and over and over. So just make sure that you really are spending that time with your client and using the right techniques. But stand back and have a look, and and really absorb what it is that you're doing there. To finish her out, as far as the actual design and style goes, I'm going to use just a little bit of gloss spray just over the top, just to give it just a bit more shine. And then I'm going to use our spray wax. This is from Style as well. And when I'm utilizing the spray wax, I'm going to spray that in, and I'm also going to start to, once again, rouge that and place that hair exactly where I want. If you're finding that texture is a little bit of an issue for you to create, a little bit onto your fingers, onto your hands, and emulsify that in at the outgrowth. For some, if you're having just a little bit of trouble. If you've got someone who needs a lot of help as far as putting texture into their hair, I would recommend going and using our sculpting clay. With the sculpting clay, you place just a little bit onto each of your fingertips, and we're going to utilize this as a volumizer. So, like so. Then you place that in there, and then right at the outgrowth, right at the scalp, you're going to put that into that hair, and what you'll find is that hair will then begin to stand up a little bit more. So when we're creating that volume, we're not creating it with, or that lift, we're not creating it with a lot of hairspray, which could add weight to it. So now we're building lift from the inside out, as opposed to layering more and more spray and putting more and more product on the ends, which ultimately is going to weigh that hair down at some point. So by putting that in, the cool part about this, if I can share a studio tip with you with the sculpting clay, is if you're not happy with the way that your shape is starting to progress, if you heat it up with your blow dryer, this becomes fairly malleable again. So you can redo your entire shape. So if you need to, if you've got a hot date that night at the end of the day, don't want to redo your hair, but you're getting a little bit flat, using a little bit of this and then heating that up and just doing like a dry blow dry with this will create that lift as well, without you having to go back and starting at the at the very start with a wet blow dry. So. What questions? Does anyone have any questions that they might have?
Don't have any right now, but what else should they look forward to?
So this is a cool thing. We've got 4 more live videos this week. Tomorrow, I believe we've got George Alderetti, James Helton, and then we have Chelsea James on Thursday, and then we have Dallin Flint on Friday. But what we would also like to do is, and you put this in your comments there, is what would you like to see? For those of us who are all in our shelter in place or stay at home or forced vacation, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, it's really cool to be able to see content out on the web and out on Facebook and all. And we came up with a week's worth of programs that we thought would be intriguing and a little bit inspiring. So you tell us what you'd like to see, because we would love to be able to provide a source of inspiration and a source of valuable information for you. So so go ahead and look those, write those in the comments there. We will get those compiled, and when we do our meeting this afternoon, we'll have a look and see what you guys are wanting, and then we will try and accommodate as many of the requests as we possibly can. I'd like to go ahead and thank each and every one of you for bearing with us on the technical difficulties on the start, but hanging out with us on this afternoon here. Can't wait to see you all tomorrow with George's class. Stay safe, stay home, stay inspired, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.